Hey, everybody, thanks for joining me today. With me today on The Opportunists is Tony Cox. Tony is from HIS Paint. They are in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Tony, how are you today?
Great, Mark. Glad to be on your podcast. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you so much for being here. And, like the other participants in this series, you were on here because I heard your story about what you guys had accomplished in sort of the crater around Kelly Moore's explosion. And so I wanted to have you on. Before we get into that story, because I know it's an interesting one, why don't you take a second and just give us a little bit of a history of your career and tell us a little bit about HIS?
Well, great. Thanks for the opportunity. So again, yes, it's a family-owned business. I after I finished the University of Oklahoma, go Sooners. I started here in about 37 years ago, and pretty much cut my teeth in the architectural sales and store operations. And then over time, in a family business, everyone begins to kind of move to where their skill set is. And then I began to transfer over into the area of industrial, technical type business development and sales. Our company made a migration more into the industrial markets along with the architectural markets. And so currently my responsibility is I'm president over our industrial business group, and oversee the operations and the technology departments of our laboratory. I'm an entrepreneur by heart. I've been married 35 years. I have 8 children, 18 grandchildren. My wife and I are both very entrepreneurial, and we have several businesses that we own outside of this, and she operates those. And so my involvement here and why I'm here today with you is this whole expansion that we have decided to get into, and the opportunity is something that the brothers and I have worked out that they basically want me to be the bus driver for this. And then after I get finished with this, I step back over into my business group. But it's really born out of a passion and love for the Kelly Moore people, the Kelly Moore culture, and my profound respect for Kelly Moore itself. A little bit about the business, the beginnings of HIS Paint, some 52 years ago, started by my father. And his story is incredible. It probably deserves another podcast on its own because nobody can tell the story like Joe can. And he's even published a book called The Paint Man. And anybody that'd be interested in that after this podcast,
Oh, no
if
way.
they'd message you, I would be glad to send them a free autograph book. But it's a pretty incredible story how he got started. Hence the name HIS Paint. Just I don't want to steal his thunder if you do read his book or get another podcast going. He basically started the company on a $10,000 loan from his friend, and
Wow.
then and kind of the rest is history. But when he named it,
Fabulous.
he got the name basically from some of the people that were working with him and his sister. They said, "Well, you got to come up with the name of your paint company that you're starting here." And he says, "Well, you know, I think I'll just dedicate it to the Lord. It's his paint company. If it succeeds, good. If it doesn't it succeed, then you know what? It wasn't my problem. But I'm just gonna just do the best I can with what I got." So that was in 1972, and he's the type of
That's a
guy
great
that
story. That's
he
a
bought
great
him a
story,
pickup
Tony.
truck, rented him a warehouse, and began to drive back and forth to Dallas to get raw materials, made the paint himself, went out and sold it himself. And
That's
yeah,
great.
I mean, you've got to hear the story. It's really good. So yeah, so Mark, so here we are today, 52 years later. We've expanded out to roughly about 130 employees, seven, soon to be nine stores, 24 dealers. We pretty much have national distribution and some international. Our core focus outside of the architectural market is we are a very large player in the industrial coatings market, and our growth and expansion in that has been as we have a very incredible staff of scientists and technologists that really help us get into the we want to call the regulatory compliant market in the industrial coatings. And so from aerospace to waste containers to trailers to the oil field industry, we're in multiple industries in that. And so again, the architectural is what we cut our teeth on. That's what we started in 1972. And we've just continued to grow as a company. we felt like a launching point to really expand that architectural portion of our business.
And so let's get into it. How has your business changed since the events of Kelly Moore? What specifically have you guys done since the Kelly Moore announced their closing?
So in a nutshell, it's been a whirlwind. And I feel like our business, I guess the biggest change is we have really embraced what it's going to take to begin to execute on such an opportunity. Since that date was announced, we have recruited 30 of their employees.
Oh, wow.
We saw an opportunity. Lots of people needed jobs, and we know that if that happened to us, we definitely want someone to recruit our people as well. And
And Tony,
so
you had said before, how many employees are you now?
we are around 130.
So you guys took a very big bite of that apple. You grew 30% headcount you decided to add, and sounds just from listening to you so far that you may still be looking to add some more. So that's a very bold step. And
Yeah,
how many new markets was that you got into with those 30 people?
well, so basically, our goal was to in the West Texas market, some of the North Texas market, and then the Northeast Oklahoma market, and then additional stores in Oklahoma City we didn't have. Our goal was to basically open up between 7 and 10 of their locations, and then hire the people to run those locations. The salesman, the store manager, assistant manager, and then. But for us, it was a little more than that. We needed to scale because that's a growth of anywhere between $7 and $15 million over the next year or two. We needed to be able to have the right people on the bus on the executive level from their team to help us, to scale that. So yeah, it's changed a lot the way that we are running our business since we brought these people in. It's completely different. It's a complete different environment than it was even 6 months ago.
Staying on the topic of sort of how this unfolded, and we're going to spend some time after you tell the story of how this all unfolded on what are the differences in your business now. But let's talk. I'm really interested in sort of the time you spent before go, no go, right? There's a time in every kind of undertaking like this where you decide, okay, we're in or we're not in. We're not going to, my father used to call it shit or get off the pot, right? And he was from the Bronx. And so tell me about that. What were you thinking in that time before you had spent any money, when you were just identifying the opportunity? What sort of conversations were you having with yourselves and with your staff there?
Yeah, so those are really interesting, especially when you take in the family dynamics part of the deal. Because there's three brothers, all three of us run different parts of the organization. My dad is the CEO, still very active at the age of 85. And
And you're here now, just to get back to the introduction, you're here now because this was not your regular function within the organization, and your brothers basically said, you do this for us and then go back to work.
exactly, exactly. So again, just being the crazy guy I am, I like a challenge. When I first started beginning to do the sales piece, back in the late 80s, Kelly Moore was kind of my idol when it came to selling paint. I almost had an aversion that if when I would go out and make calls on contractors, if I saw the Kelly Moore label, I knew that my chances of breaking someone from the loyalty to Kelly Moore and the quality was probably less than 10%.
Right.
And so whenever this opportunity came up for us as a company, all of us began asking ourselves, what are we going to do? Are we gonna hope these people begin to, as they absorb into Sherwin-Williams and Spectrum and whoever else in town, are we going to expect that possibly we can absorb some of those folks, or are we going to put some type of strategy together to possibly capture some of that market share? And what does that look like? And the more we begin to think about it, at first it was a very passive approach of saying, you know, it would be a very big business distraction. It would be very difficult. We really wouldn't really know how to do it, but it is an incredible opportunity. And then so as we begin to collaborate on it, and then get some coaching, because we have a board of directors in our company and we have outside coaches. We begin to see that this is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. And it's like, it's either you jump through it or you just stand back and let it be absorbed in other companies. And then we begin to pick apart. So what's that going to look like? Who are we going to need to hire from that organization to make it happen? And so we started looking at the perspective of, before we even thought about it was going to cost, we just knew that the window was short. And what we were told is you have about 4 weeks to get this done, because from our outside sources, we understood Big Blue was going to do the same thing. They were going to go after their best people, take over their leases, and
Yep.
basically shut those leases down, put those people to work for them to grab that market share. And so we had to make the decision, what
I
markets do
was
we
telling
want on?
people the same thing, by the way, Tony. The people that I was speaking to, I was telling them all the same thing. Move fast. That's your strategy, is move fast.
Yeah, and that was basically it. I mean, because everybody's looking for these people at the same time. They're all
Yeah.
searching jobs, everything else.
Yeah.
And so we put a 4 week timeline on it. And we basically said in 4 weeks, we've got to take over as many leases that we want, and we've got to hire the salesman and the store manager and assistant manager for each one of those stores. And we put a multiplier on that, basically thinking, if we can get those things, we'll get X percentage of the market share for that store. And what's after 4 weeks, probably those people will ought to be hired, or those leases will not be available. And that's when we really, it was kind of like you're saying, we had to make that decision, and we had to begin moving forward with it. Even before our board of directors gave us full approval, we were like, because we knew the opportunity was before us, and we just needed to just start moving quickly.
What were some of the early hurdles that you had?
Yeah, so getting into the selection of people we wanted, again, just strategically, we said we need the guy that understands who all the store managers are, the operations, and the salesman for the territories we're going into. And so he was the first guy we got on the phone, brought him in, and he was ready to walk away from the paint industry because he had given 25 years of his life to Kelly Moore, and he felt pretty burned. And he came into our executive team meeting, and he says, "What's up?" And we cast our vision of what we wanted. We said, "Hey, listen, we love Kelly Moore. We respect him as one of the most formidable competitors in the market. And we know that they have some of the best people in the market, and we undoubtedly have some of the best products. And so our vision is we want to hire as many of you guys as we can and put a Kelly Moore team, almost a Kelly Moore division within our company, and foster that culture and learn from it, and let you guys continue in what you guys have developed, and you can teach us to be a better company. And of course, it's going to be a win-win for all of us. So does that sound like something that you'd be interested in doing?" And he just said, "Man," he said, I was ready to walk away from this. And if that was if anything like that was what I was going to hear, he said, "I'm all in." And then he had the contacts, and then him and I began to tag team, making offers to every one of those sales guys and every one of those managers and assistant
So you were
managers.
making offers within days. How quickly after you heard the announcement, which I think was January 8th or 12th or somewhere around there, how quickly after, Tony, do you think you made your first job offer?
To him, probably within a day after they got the official, because we had heard the rumors that the stores were only going to be open so many hours a day. So our people kind of kept driving by to see, well, is it closed or is it not?
Right.
Are they shutting down or not? And then about that time, through other industry contacts, we reached out to Chris, and he was the one that we started with. And then, of course, from there, and just having constant meetings with him, I would say within a week of that time, I want to say we probably had 15 to 20 of those 30 people hired.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, because we knew Big Blue's right on them, and they're going to be
Yeah.
knocking down their door. Well, we were being told the offers made to these store managers and sales guys was ridiculous. way
Yeah.
over market pricing.
Yeah.
So we prepared for that, part of our financial outlook. And it's just, again, how often ever does the opportunity come to hire seasoned, trained people with relationships?
Never.
And it's a win-win for
Never,
them.
Tony. I've never seen anything like this in terms of opportunity. There have been, of course, other opportunities, but nothing like this. This was really very unusual.
It was crazy. So we had two strategies, or actually three at the same time. We've got to hire all these store managers and salespeople, assistant managers if possible. We've got to immediately take the leases over or get them. We can't really take them over, but we need landlords. What
Who I'm sure you
executives?
found very willing because the landlords that I spoke to did not have a particularly good experience with Kelly Moore.
That is a whole nother story. As far as the executives, we knew that we really needed a technology guy. We knew that if we're going to really execute this well with the strategy that we have, that we've got to have the guy that, if, let's say, and this is the same for all of our competitors, if you go to market and you're trying to get the loyal Kelly Moore people back, they're loyal to two things: the relationships, but also the product. And we knew that everybody can say they have an offset, but that offset better work because you got one shot. And so part of our strategy was for insurance is, hey, we've really got to get the technical guy that really understands what's going on behind it.
Insurance on the you're talking about insurance on the conversion rate, basically,
Well,
right?
insurance.
You want to make sure that these customers that I'm basically buying are going to stay with me, and the way to do that is to make sure they get a can of paint that feels like a can of Kelly Moore paint.
You couldn't have said it better. And
Brilliant, man. That's brilliant. That's why I
that,
wanted you on this show, because think about how smart that was, right? Very
well,
nice,
again,
Tony.
that's the deal. If you lay this kind of money into it, you better have
Yeah.
an insurance policy. So, from there, again, we would listen to the two key people we hired that were more on the executive side, and then all these store managers and salespeople, and say, who else do we need to scale this thing? Who do we need to be talking to? What does this look like? And then we finally landed a third person here this last week that was on pretty senior level in the Kelly Moore organization, and she was really understood operations really well, probably more than anybody in the company. Matter of fact, she was being mentored for many years to be a pretty senior level executive. Yeah, there was about three or four key people that we were told we really want to try to get, and a few of them passed us by. We didn't have a chance to get to those, but the ones we wanted the most, we were able to land. And I think that was part of our vision. But the leases deal is a whole nother story that's pretty exciting. It's unprecedented for a landlord to be contacted by another company and say, we want to take over this lease, before they've even gotten notice from Kelly Moore.
Yeah.
And they literally thought that we were trying to sandbag them, be
Oh,
dishonest.
wow.
I mean, they were thinking, what are you even talking about?
So was Gassenheimer just not even going to tell them? Did he just walk away and not even write them letters or emails and say fuck you? Or I don't know how that was handled by them.
Well, so that took about 2 weeks after we were in these negotiations. It was basically, we had to go talk to the landlord of the property management company, tell the story, show them the proof in the newspaper.
Right.
They from the background sensed something was wrong, but they couldn't say it.
And none of them had been paid for 60, 90 days. So
Yeah,
they knew, right. They knew they had a problem.
yeah. So basically, for us, the gold mine was this: when can you ever walk into a store, have 5 or 10 shakers,
Yeah. It's
tent
crazy.
machines,
Right.
inventory?
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
Right. I'll be open tomorrow.
yeah, and
Yeah, it's
just
crazy.
change the keys and put the same people in there. So then at that point, then that's when it got real hairy. It's like, who owns all this stuff? Who owns it? And
Yeah.
the landlord was saying, we can't give you this space. I mean, if this goes into bankruptcy, they're going to have an auction and sell all this stuff. And we said, no, they're not going bankrupt. They're not. They're going to settle it out of court. And of course, a landlord doesn't believe that at all. So what we had to do is convince them that, hey, hopefully you're going to get notice. Let's sign a letter of intent. Let's get a draft lease here. then you reach out to the headquarters and ask for a release of the lease. And finally, within a few weeks, they begin to get letters to those people who reached out for a release, and they got it. Then
And
there
so
was
they got a release
ambiguity.
that just says basically whatever was in there you can have.
Well, no, that took a little longer.
Oh, okay.
That took another week or two, because then that's when who owns this stuff,
Right.
and what's Kelly Moore going to do with it? And then finally, about
Disposed.
4 weeks later, they announced this: we have X company as a landlord. If you don't want to keep this, that you can get on the list, and they will come dispose of all the equipment and the paint and everything else. And if not, it's your choice as the landlord to keep it. Now, this is where it gets hairy. This is the obstacle. Some of the leases we had inked before they got the second letter. And in our contract, we said everything in the store becomes ours. It's all ours to sign the lease, because we wanted it. And plus, the bonus is we'll haul off all the hazardous disposal. There's a lot of hazardous stuff in the store that landlord didn't want to get rid of.
Right.
And so then after they sent that second letter, we had a couple of landlords that said, hey, wait a second. This is my stuff. This isn't your stuff. And then some of them, they had a fire sale, put everything on Facebook, and
Oh, no.
told the whole city, come here, we're going to liquidate this store. That's when the leases begin to get complicated at that point. Well, then there was there were select markets that we really wanted to be in. And so I think one of the most important stores we wanted to get was this small store in Granbury, Texas. And there was us, there was Texas Paint, there was, I think, Farrell Calhoun. Yeah, and they all wanted that store. And
Yeah.
even PPG wanted the store. And that
Yeah.
was the one that
Which seems
it was,
ridiculous, but
yeah,
okay.
it was a showdown. We had the people hired, but we didn't have the lease. And so the people are going to go with the lease. And so that one kind of fell apart on us. So we had several that were kind of like that. And, but that was probably the most disappointing one. But I would say that was probably one of the other big obstacles. The other big obstacle was that some of these landlords, they were wanting to negotiate for 2 or 3 weeks because of the legal ramifications of every decision.
Yeah.
They didn't want to get burned. They didn't want to be
I see that
responsible.
actually. Now, thinking about that from the landlord's perspective, I see where they would want to move a little slower there and get some advice from counsel, right? That's a slippery slope. They don't know what you and I knew at the time, which is this freaking guy's running away, right? He's leaving everything right there and he's not coming back. But they don't have that confidence. They didn't know Gassenheimer. They didn't know his history at that point. Nobody knew anything.
Yeah, so that was, but I think once we were able to, and the challenge was you have to land them at the same time. If you land the people and you don't land the lease, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
If you land the lease and you don't land the people,
you're in
then
bigger
you're in
trouble.
trouble. I mean,
Right.
because it's like we had myself, Chris, and our whole team working both angles at the same time. We had a real estate broker, we had the brothers. It was like this one big force of just, hey, we're right in it on ground level. There's no red tape. These decisions have to be made within hours, probably less than days, because if
That's
not,
crazy.
it's over. So
In the
it
paint
was,
business, who would have thought that kind of action like a trading floor? Who would have thought? And so that's a great segue, Tony. Let's talk about what effort this took from your team. How many people were involved? How was the work divided up? How did it affect your bandwidth? However, you're comfortable saying.
yeah. So basically, there was probably about, I want to say, 5 or 6 of us constantly assigned to a different aspect of it. On the back end side, the HR side of just getting all these people hired, processed, and everything else. My oldest brother, the CFO of our company, he single-handedly took that on, because it was just so much to process that many people through,
Right.
get them on payroll. Because again, we
Right.
had to
Just
start.
the logistics of adding 30% to your payroll overnight, right? The
Yeah,
logistics of that.
it was crazy, and it was. And then internally, we had a whole team doing product management meetings, logistics of once we get these stores open, how we're going to, get them stocked and inventoried, what products those people want to come back to see, whatever their most favorite products were. And so, getting the supply chain set up to get those in there, to get all the sundries in there, and then the whole setting up of the communications between all those new stores and our facility. We brought a software team in to help us get that operational. And then
And did you have that on staff, or did you have to go out and get that expertise?
they're kind of subcontractors that we were already working with.
Yep.
But one of the biggest obstacles once we got this rolling is Chris and all the Kelly Moore sales guys. They're used to a structure of a company that's 7 to 8x us. And so they sit down with us and said, guys, listen, we're going to have to implement some structure that you guys have never seen before at the size of company you are. And we said, bring it on, show us how to do that. And then that was instrumental of our last hire that I was sharing with you about earlier, is to bring someone who had that 50,000 foot view of a company 8x size of what needs to happen. So again, we had it all piecemealed out. All the brothers were working as a team. We had our VP of marketing working, our new director of operations and stores and sales guys working, and everybody had their different pieces. And it just, in symphony, it kind of had to all come together.
And so you were running the whole thing. Did you have any task specific work that you were doing, or were you just keeping everybody organized?
I think mine was mainly working with Chris to negotiate the final offers for these guys that he knew that he was going to have to pay them, and then working with my broker on all these leases, of just making sure that we had a real estate attorney involved, because the worst thing you want to do is get wrapped up in a bad deal
Yep.
that can go south on you. So I think for my area, I was just basically where we're in the weeds is I was just trying to get the leases closed while I was working with Chris on closing the deals with the sales, because we again knew that was the most important thing to deliver if we're going to make it happen.
And you've opened these stores, you've grown these people, you've added these products. What's the future looking like for you now?
We looked at this thing as a startup, because anytime you're whatever size of organization that you are, if you bring a whole new book of business in with all new people, you really have to treat it as a startup, meaning that you have to, at the same time that you have a vision of it and you begin implementing it, you've got to finance it, you've got to build the structure around it, and then you've got to keep your finger on the pulse and get constant feedback to see, have we made poor decisions? What do we need to do different? Because we're in the thick of this. So our task right now is looking at each piece and say, what mistakes have we had? What opportunities are there still? And what are we going to do here? And so part of that is basically one of the obstacles after we got 5 of the 7 open was people don't know we're open. They drive down the street, they see the Kelly Moore sign that's getting ready to be taken off, and they just knew Kelly Moore went out of business. They don't know the store's open. So the whole deal now is, moving forward, is a big, massive marketing campaign
In
by
all of
which,
those markets, yeah, or blitzes, or
yeah.
however else you want to get the word out.
And we didn't even think about that getting into this, because
Right.
we're not a big marketing company. So we
Right.
had to go out and hire a big ad agency firm to help
Right.
us do that, because we're thinking, I mean, in my naive mind, I thought, well, the minute it gets on the street, all the Kelly Moore people are just going to come right to my store and buy paint.
One of the questions I've had in the back of my head to ask you as we sort of wrapped up this is what were some of the mines that you tripped on along the way? And so there's one for you right there. It sounds like you spent a bunch of money that you probably hadn't originally calculated. But listen, you were working so fast, Tony, you weren't calculating, right? You were estimating. That's all you were doing was guessing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the other thing we didn't really estimate is some of the structure we don't have implemented yet. And that is filling in really quickly to do that. Another thing we didn't estimate is these 2 last stores we're trying to get open in some West Texas towns. Those have taken much longer. Almost all the other ones from start to finish took 4 weeks to hire the people and to get the lease open. and these last two are just kind of lingering. And so the landmine there is, again, we people are already developing relationships with the other paint stores in that town. So
They were doing it the very next day, right?
the further you get into painting season,
Yeah.
the further those relationships dissolve. But still, to us, it's about, this is the vision we had, and we're going to continue to execute the vision till it's completed.
Well, I am excited for you guys, and this was every bit as exciting of a story to hear as I was expecting from you when we did the prep. Tony, I'm so grateful that you allowed me to make this content with you.
Well, again, and I appreciate that, Mark, and I'll just leave a little disclaimer. We are a very faith-based company. Part of our mission statement is advancing the kingdom. And in saying that, I kind of close with saying, Proverbs says, do not boast about tomorrow because you don't know what your plans are going to bring forth. And so it's all exciting and great and motivating to talk about this. But in 12 months and 24 months, that's when we're going to know about, how things worked out. So in
Yeah.
saying all that, I just be honest with you, the disclaimer is, if it's the Lord's will, because it doesn't matter what us as an executive team think as owners. If God doesn't pour out his blessings in the still, then it was a very expensive lesson. But we don't see it as that way, because Kelly Moore people, Kelly Moore products, and then reaching out to a community of people that were unemployed and needed jobs. I mean, we feel like it's going to be a win-win blessing for all of us.
I think that you guys are not going to need a whole heck of a lot of help from greater sources. That's my own opinion, because just having listened to you, and now just for people listening to this for the first time, Tony and I had one other conversation, not quite as detailed as this, where I got a sense for what that experience was that he took his company through. And yeah, I'm thinking you guys, it sure sounds to me like you guys have done a great job and you've lined yourselves up for some success. Now, it sounds to me, Tony, like you've got some experience that it might not come overnight, but you guys did an absolutely outstanding job, and really, really impressive how quickly you moved, because companies, even smaller family companies, are not necessarily known for being this opportunistic. So really good for you guys. Congratulations.
Well, we appreciate that, Mark, and hats off to you. Again, your reputation in the industry is great. Chris, Chris Cook, who's my right-hand man in this deal, he definitely follows you and said, hey, this would be a great opportunity if we could ever make connections. And so we're honored to be on your podcast, and really, hopefully great things for you. And, to anybody that's listening on this deal, on your podcast, we extend the invitation in any way we can, as a paint dealer, whoever, to make our products available to you, whether it be industrial coatings or architectural coatings. Of course, we're super strong in both right now, and would be glad to be of service to anyone out there that's a big follower of you.
So Tony Cox, HIS Paints, Oklahoma City. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. It was an honor to be on your program.